Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another video. I'm so sorry for not uploading recently. I've just been slammed with shit to do, and I had really just have not been able to find a time to make a video. So I'm barely finding like a 10-minute time frame to make this shit. So I'm gonna have to go really fast on this, but obviously these are my games of the week. I see a lot of people saying Georgia Alabama is the best championship matchup, but I feel like it's a little shitty to disregard Oregon and Washington for literally being a top 5 matchup between two top 5 teams. I'm not saying that Georgia and Alabama is a bad game and not even close to worthy. Is definitely there, but I feel like a top 5 is too much to just be glossed over. But with that being said, let's get straight into this. Like and subscribe would help. A comment always helps. Let's go. So the first matchup, we got New Mexico State versus Liberty, which this one is weird because New Mexico State has 3 losses, one being to Liberty, and a pretty bad beatdown. But New Mexico State, pretty much since then, I mean, they just had a little bit of a rough start to the year. They started off the year going 2-3, but since then they've won out. It may not have been very easy until about the Auburn game where they absolutely kicked ass, and then they beat an underrated Jacksonville State team. New Mexico State has gone on an 8-game winning streak. However, Liberty, they have been on a 12-game winning streak and 2 pretty respectable opponents. They kicked the crap out of Bowling Green, which I know Bowling Green's not much, but in terms of this, it is. They obviously kicked the crap out of New Mexico State. They really just slaughtered their competition like it's nothing. The 2 closest games were Sam Houston and MTSU, and even then is a game they kind of owned. And they kind of just dominated throughout the year. They should win this. I'll give New Mexico State the benefit of the doubt for making it this far, and like completely churning their season around and becoming bowl game eligible. But Liberty should go undefeated this year, probably honestly with a bowl game win, whoever they get against. This is a pretty good Liberty team. Not to be glossed over, I feel like they could hand a Power 5 team some issues. But yeah, Liberty should win this. Sorry, New Mexico State. I'm rooting for you in the end, but I've got Liberty. Oregon versus Washington, game of the week. Oh my goodness. I just saw something. So obviously this one, was already played, but Washington had the home field, and we know Oregon threw that game away through bad decisions and mistakes. They could have easily won that game. Oregon's favored by 9.5. 9.5 is pretty ridiculous. Both quarterbacks are fantastic, both in the Heisman race. Both running backs are fantastic. And then obviously you've got Troy Franklin and Rome Odunze. These are really stacked teams overall. I do think even though last time it was at Washington and it was a really close game that Oregon should have won, these are really well-matched teams. Give me Oregon just because I feel like it's hard for Washington to beat a team twice. And ultimately, Washington has really struggled a lot more throughout the year than Oregon has. Oregon's only struggles were obviously the loss to Washington, but really like at Texas Tech to like close to open up the year, that's like their only struggle. And then like Washington State put up a few points against them. That's pretty much it. They handled USC, handled Oregon State, clobbered ASU, clobbered Utah, clobbered Stanford, clobbered Colorado. I mean, Oregon really has no issue in this conference whatsoever other than Washington, which Washington, on the other hand, is they've really, really struggled this year. They struggled immensely. They start off the year with 4 annihilations, actually. Then they play in a close one at U of A. That's pretty respectable, going on the road and winning there. We didn't know U of A was as good. Well, I did, but not everybody else did. We didn't know that Arizona was actually a good team this year. Then they end up beating Oregon in a great match. Then they beat ASU by 8 at Washington. They barely sneak out of Stanford, barely sneak out of USC. barely walk out of their home stadium against Utah, but I mean that was a very impressive second half by Washington. And then they barely walk out of Oregon State by 2 points in a very rainy game. But still, that this was the second half that they did not look good in. Washington, and then they obviously, the last second field goal against Washington State to basically secure the undefeated record. Honestly, Washington looks to me like this team just plays down to their opponent. Because when they play, I mean, nonetheless, even though Oregon made those mistakes against Washington in the last matchup, Washington still put up 36 points. That's still really, really good. That's still notable. I feel like this Washington team plays down to the team they're playing, and they have a lot of potential that's just hidden in there and locked up. This team could break out, could potentially pull some shit off, but I'm just going to go by the strength of schedule and by the fact that Oregon could have won the game. I mean, I say strength of schedule, and even though these teams have played pretty much the same opponents, one team has handled business way better than the other, except they just have a bad loss to the very team they're playing. So, give me Oregon. I feel like a lot of people are picking Oregon in this, and I really do feel bad for Washington. This was just such a shitty year for them to have all these one-loss teams that could potentially make it. I mean, Washington goes undefeated. They're going to probably lose to Oregon, and now they're going to get punished for it. They win out the whole year and beat Oregon, but because they lose at the very end, they are out. That's pretty shitty. Feel bad for them, but it's just more of the reason for the 12-team playoff, and we will learn from our mistakes. Let's move on. Oklahoma State versus Texas. Mad respect for Oklahoma State making it to this game. I mean, let's not forget, this Oklahoma State team lost the third game of the year, 33-7 against South Alabama. Let's remember that, all right? Now, they may have had a lot of injuries in that game and whatnot. Playing a bad quarterback. Like, they didn't have any of their starters that they have now in the game, and they took a bad loss to this team. But since then, I mean, they had a bad 7-point loss at Iowa State, which Iowa State's a respectable opponent, but then they have a great win against Kansas State, a good win against Kansas, beat down on West Virginia, beat down on Cincinnati, and then a very big win against Oklahoma, probably last time they were going to play that match, and then the 45-3 loss at UCF. Terrible loss there. But then they bounce back and beat Houston on the road, and then they barely make it to the conference championship with a double overtime win against BYU. The world's in favor of Texas. We've got to respect Oklahoma State for making it this far. Think they'll make it tough, but this is a serious Texas team with Quinn Ewers probably trying to make a statement and whatnot. He's not really that high up in the Heisman talk. He's probably going to just be looking towards the NFL now. He's going to be looking to make some plays. But Oklahoma State, they do have a pretty decent squad on their hands. These teams haven't played this year. I'll give Oklahoma State the benefit of the doubt. It'll be close, but give me Texas. Georgia versus Bama. How badly I want to take Bama on this one, you don't even know. But this Georgia team is on their way to a three-peat. They're primed for it. However, they did say that one guy, I think they said McConkey is out for the game. They said something like that. But one thing is for sure about this this Bama team is that they really have bounced back since the loss to Texas. I mean, seriously, Bama has won. Yeah, they've won every single game from that point on. So here we go. Our top stories: Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey, and others. It's just going to drill me with ads right now. I'm trying to read it here. I should have read this before, but I was hurrying. Yeah, and I mean, even then, like, Georgia really struggled against Georgia Tech, which I actually expected. But yeah, McConkey suffered a low ankle sprain in the win over Ole Miss, finishing that game with 81 receiving yards. He tried to play next week against Tennessee, then left after a few snaps and didn't suit up the last week. So these are question marks. Brock Bowers sat out versus Georgia Tech, it says. There is significant injuries on this team. Is that going to be enough to hold Georgia? I don't think so. I just really think this Georgia team is absolutely loaded beyond our eyeballs. They handle every single game. They another example of playing down to your competition. 10-point win against South Carolina. 7-point win against Auburn, which that's a big matchup there. Georgia versus Auburn. And then a 7 or an 8-point win against Georgia Tech, rivalry. They play down to their competition because when they play Kentucky, who was ranked 20 and undefeated at the time, they destroy them. When they play at Tennessee, they destroy them. When they play Ole Miss, they destroy them. Missouri was actually a well-matched team, so that was a close match. I think Georgia plays down to their competition, and Bama is competition, so this team will definitely show a lot of life in this game. I like Jalen Milroe, but it will be down to whether he makes mistakes and throws interceptions. I mean, really, Bama lucked out. I know it was a great throw and a great play by Bama, but honestly, that Auburn player was absolutely lost. Bama lucked out there. They could have lost that game. So give me Georgia. Respectfully, these are both great teams. Bama is a very deserving team. They have bounced back since that Texas loss when Jalen Milroe was only starting his second game. So cut him some slack, but give me Georgia. SMU versus Tulane. This is actually a surprising one. SMU is 10-2. Tulane is 11-1. SMU has 2 losses to Big 12 opponents. A 17-point loss at Oklahoma and a 17-point loss at TCU. Respectable opponents. Now, the TCU one doesn't look as respectable, but that's a rivalry, and you're on the road at your rival's turf. The Oklahoma one is actually very respectable because, I mean, Oklahoma's a 2-loss team in a much stronger conference who beat Texas. So, but Tulane has, if they really would have had their starting quarterback against Ole Miss, I think Tulane would have won, but that's their only loss. I've got to go with Tulane. I just realized when I when I've been making all these prediction videos, I haven't been calling any overtime, so fuck it. We'll call an overtime. Tulane wins a close one. These are pretty offensive teams, so I can expect it to be a bit higher scoring, but give me Tulane. Michigan versus Iowa. I feel like a lot of people are going to judge the Michigan game and say this one isn't even going to be close. But Michigan, they did struggle with Penn State on the road. Yes, they struggled with Ohio State. Those are respectable opponents, though. They managed to pursue their undefeated. Iowa, on the other hand, has 2 losses. A very bad loss to Minnesota, but we know a punt return was taken off the board by an awful mistake, which ended up leaving Iowa to a loss. They could be a 1-loss team right now, and the other one was a 31-0 shutout at Penn State. The reason why I'm going to defend Iowa is because, 1, they have done much better since that Penn State game, and 2, that Penn State game was at night. Penn State versus Iowa is a very big matchup. I'm not going to dock Iowa points for getting crushed at Penn State in a night game. That's just one of the most unreal environments ever for a football team. And overall, Penn State probably would have just won the game on their own. But still, give me Michigan. We can call for the defensive game. We can go ahead and call it a defensive game simply. Louisville versus FSU. I think Tate Rodmaker is not going to be in this game. There's a lot. It says he's doubtful and whatnot. If that is the case, Jordan Travis is out, Tate Rodmaker is out. What is stopping Louisville from losing this game? Louisville's going to go into this game swinging with or without their starting with or without FSU starting quarterback. Louisville will make this game close. I'm taking Louisville. I said it last week, and then Louisville lost to Kentucky. I should address that. I'll say that in the description. I forgot about that part. But give me Louisville. I think FSU, they're just injury invested. They've got great players. Don't get me wrong. Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson, Trey Benson. They've got offensive weapons that will definitely help out whichever quarterback is playing drastically. But considering this Florida State team has struggled all year, And I know Louisville has 2 losses and has struggled, but ultimately it will be down to whether Louisville beats themselves up or not. Louisville should have beat Kentucky, but they didn't. Louisville should have beaten Pitt, but they had like 7 turnovers. So give me give me Louisville. I've got to wrap this one up though. Quickly. Sorry for the lack of posting. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe would help. A comment always helps, and that's all for me. Adios.